You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's episode, where we go back, the Desert Storm. Yes, a Desert Storm story, which we haven't had many of here on the Hazard Ground. Excited for you guys to say it. Actually, it's a story we've told once before, but from another perspective. So you'll hear that coming up in just a moment. Please continue to use our Amazon promotion. You go to our website, hazardground.com. You click on the Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage. It'll redirect you to Amazon. You can do all of your normal Amazon shopping. We'll get a percentage of what you guys spend, and then we'll donate a percentage of that back to some of the charities and organizations you've heard featured here on the show. So it's an easy way for you to help out veterans charities just by doing your Amazon shopping, and make sure you go to hazardground.com first. Also works through your smartphone. It's very convenient. It'll redirect it to the app. So if you save all your credit card information, it's user friendly. So again, hazardground.com, the place to go. Please continue to leave us Apple reviews and leave us 5-star reviews wherever you get these podcasts. We certainly appreciate it, but that helps the algorithm, helps grow this Hazard Ground community, and continues to get these stories out there to as many people as possible. So please, Apple reviews, 5-star reviews, thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Thumbs up and a like to all the content there. We certainly appreciate that. And share it wherever you can. As well, follow us on other social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast. This week's guest, as a former member of the United States Army, retired Master Sergeant with almost 22 years of service. More than half of his career was spent in the special operations world as a Green Beret. And as I mentioned earlier, he deployed to Desert Storm. He was actually stop-lost right before 9/11, but it was eventually retired in 2003. Spent time as a federal air marshal, worked for Raytheon, and is the author of a book called No One is Fatherless, which includes 365 daily devotionals. And he's here to share his story about something that happened in Desert Storm in I think it was Saudi Arabia. Let me get it right here. It was anyway. Long story short, I'll let him tell it. But it was one of those missions where his team was discovered. They were Green Berets embedded, and they were discovered by the enemy. And much similar to what you saw in Operation Red Wings and Lone Survival. I'm getting very long-winded here. I'm going to let him tell the story. It is Dan Kostrzebski joining us here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Dan, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
You're most welcome. Honored to be here. Thank you so much for giving me this
now that I butchered the beginning of your story, I should have kind of set it all out here. But your story is actually tied into the story that Chad Balwans from episode 140 and ODA 525
yes, sir.
In 5th Special Forces Group told. And that was, way back when. You have to go back to some of our episodes from 2019 to get it, but it is episode 140 if you'd like the connective tissue here of what had happened. And that moral dilemma that was where you were discovered by the local populace and what you do. And if you've seen the movie Lone Survivor, it's very similar to that, but this was obviously preceding all of that. And so I'm glad that you and your team reached out. What's great is that Chad's episode was so long ago. The fact that you guys are, years later reaching out to kind of share this, and I think is fantastic.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's an incredible honor to share the past, because that's what we learn our greatest lessons. So, what are your questions? I'll just tell you that I'll just share right off the bat. I was the new guy on 525 as a young medic coming through the Q course, as Chad has shared numerous times. And that was my first real combat to war deployment. I did have a bit of a christening in Somalia upon my arrival to 5th Group when we were in Mogadishu prior to Gulf Storm, and we had to exit the country.
That was actually prior to
the
down
Gulf
happening
War.
as well.
Yes, but I got a taste of how fast things can change on a battlefield or in foreign countries in regards to hostilities. So
you signed up at a time that was completely peacetime. Why did you end up signing up?
Well, I came in 1981 as a result of, I was arrested, being a young teenager. And I was told by the judge to go talk to the recruiter and come up with something to do in a short amount of time.
For the civilians listening, there's a Jody call, a cadence. Got a letter in the mail, go to war, go to jail. That's the old draft thing. But But you were embodied in that.
I was that guy.
Yeah.
I got in a little bit of a bind, in a little town of Perry, New York, and Judge Ruth Milks directed Sergeant Stanley, my recruiter, to find me a job. So that's how I entered the Army, and ironically, as a military police person. So,
did you know anything about the Army?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in the old black and white TVs, and I was a big fan of John Wayne growing up.
I knew that was coming.
Yep, and the Green Berets were on there, but I grew up in a farming community, living it out there on a cattle farm, with a lot of different farmers, and working hard and being in the woods a great deal. I enjoyed trapping and shooting. I was very gifted, with parents and grandparents that taught me how to use a rifle at a very young age, and I was bringing food to the table, at 13, 14 years old. Wow. And trapping and doing different things out in the woods at night. So my navigation skills, as far as learning how to navigate the terrain and thinking you're lost and so forth, it wasn't uncomfortable for me growing up.
When you first signed up, was the idea of a Green Beret anywhere in your mind?
Not exactly. It was more, you're young, you're 18 years old, you're just taking it all in, and you're just doing what you're told and learning to work with different people from all different walks of life. And, I had drill sergeants that were from the Vietnam War, and, I had a lot to learn, and being with, just being through basic training AIT at Fort McClellan, Alabama. So I was just sucking it up and just doing what I was told. I actually thought it was pretty nice to be able to wake up at 6 o'clock instead of 4:30 to go milk the cows and do different things. So,
was there any part of you during like basic and AIT was like, jail's got to be better than this?
Oh, no, I didn't want to go to jail. No, this was much better than jail. All right. I mean, the food was great. I was putting on weight, life was good, for me. Yeah, I was enjoying it. Yeah.
Some people tell you, listen, man, this has got to be weird. Jail can't be this bad, can it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But nonetheless, all right. So you end up in Germany for the first 3 years of your career.
Right.
And that's where you first get exposed to the idea of special ops?
Well, I had I was a physically fit young man, and I was selected to attend a French commando school in Trier, Germany, of which one of the soldiers that was there with me was a staff sergeant, and he was a Green Beret out of 10th group. And we were being trained different things, and, just military operations in urban terrain, survival tactics, escaping, your SEER school type training. And we even escaped from the camp one night and got out and visited a guest house. I mean, it was just the typical little don't do this, but we did it because we were trained to do it kind of thing. And one of the little rascal things that we did is we hung our underwear up on the flagpoles, which was the 3 countries that were attending the camp. And that wasn't my idea, but I was just following along, keeping up with my brother, the Green Beret. And of course, we paid a price the next morning when the formations were out there and our little underwears were flapping in the wind, and they had to figure out who did that. So that was my groundbreaking to being a Green Beret kind of spirit, if you would.
Did that sort of at least have you start asking questions about, like, how do I do this for the American side of the house?
Absolutely. I mean, you're in that course for 3 weeks. We went through an escape and evasion period for about 7 days across, different mountain ranges and stuff in Europe. And yeah, I was definitely getting more interested in it by far. Yeah, absolutely. But I was also having mixed feelings about getting out of the Army, finishing my time of duty, going back home. I would go. It wasn't like it is today where you can communicate and you had video chat and all these other things. So my communications with my brothers and sisters were very infrequent. I was the oldest of 5 children. And I did miss my brothers and sisters and my parents and so forth. So I did get out. I had a break in service.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, I had a break in service. I was out for about 6 months. I was working in Batavia, New York at Ebling Electric, and all the veterans were coming in. What do you think? Putting doubt in my mind about what are you doing, getting out. And it really, I missed it. So by chance, God's grace, my Uncle Paul, my dad's brother, was a recruiter at the Buffalo MEP station. And I contacted him and said, "Hey, Uncle Paul, can you get me back in?" And he explained that, Dan, it's not too good for the prior service guys right now, but I'll see what I can find. And
what was not so good for the prior service guys?
Well, they weren't accepting prior service enlistees back in the service. I mean, on a wide open scale at that time. So
that was in the early stages of BLU can be, I guess. Once you were,
I don't think so. No, if you got, I mean,
were already what you were, and now you're gone.
It was a crapshoot where I was at the mercy of the Army if I was to be able to come back in.
Yeah.
So, and I came back in as a Spec 4, 55 Bravo, which is an ammunition specialist. Nothing cool about that, if you would. But I'll tell you what happened. My attitude was totally different. Now, the first time, being in on the first time, I was doing what I was told and following through. But my second time, getting out and really having the experience of, surviving out there in the real world, if you would, and then thinking, okay, I'm going back in. So coming back in, my attitude was entirely different. I was in to win it. And I was honor graduate for, basically all the training that I had gone through. I went to 63rd Ordinance Company up in Fort Lewis. Their first, one of the Ranger Battalion was up there. The first Special Forces group was up there. I went to PLDC. My roommate was a Special Forces communications sergeant. And then while I was there, I learned how to do the paperwork game and talk to the first sergeants. I mean, when you're a troop, you're literally at the mercy of your first sergeant and platoon sergeant. So I had learned the 4187, that form. And
still
I had
around, by the way.
Yeah. So I learned how to fill that out. I had a little assistance there from my communication sergeant there in the Green Berets at first group. We had all the right stuff in the right places, and I was allowed to go to airborne school like right after PLDC. And if you Fort Benning, they had the little field tables out there, and they had the different guys from the 82nd, the Ranger Battalion, and there was a new table there with the 160th, and I was like, and they needed my MOS, and we can get you there right away. And I was like, okay, I'm in, let's go. So I literally left from jump school and went straight to 160th, and I was at the receiving station, and I was greeted by a sergeant there in civilian clothes, which I wasn't mentally prepared for. And I was brought to the Task Force 160th headquarters, and there I was in they called it the FAR platoon. So that was the airborne platoon that airdropped the rockets and the fuel to support air operations, aviation operations for Special Operations Command, the Night Stalkers.
Yeah. And I guess the earliest days of it, right?
The earliest days of it, yes. And
did you realize at the time what you were getting involved into?
Not exactly. No, not at all. But I was immediately, excited. Physical training was the real deal. Physical training. The Captain Buffkin was our first team leader. He was a Ranger, and he pushed us to our limits in regards to being prepared to go into foreign countries and setting up fuel pods, ammunition, rockets, 2.75-inch rocket pods, and taking care of the little birds and Black Hawks and whatnot that were involved in combat.
So as you're starting to get this experience, does somebody come to you and say, hey, Dan, would you like to be a Green Beret? Do you want to try to do this?
Yes.
Something that you want to do, or are you the one who's, raising your hand saying, pick me?
I was immediately identified to be the guy to go to send to the boards, the Soldier of the Month board, the NCO of the Month board, the NCO of the Quarter, these boards that the military has. And I was doing well with that. And they wanted to send me. SOCOM had just organized itself. And that's where the Green Berets and the Ranger guys, would compete for these same boards. And Sergeant Major Farrow said, Dan, I want you to compete against these guys. And so I had to brush up on numerous infantry skills, the M60 machine guns, taking it apart, putting it together, all these different communication skills with the different radios and so forth. I had to have my land nav skills at peak performance, and to be in extreme, the physical condition to navigate these land nav courses in short time, the road marches and so forth. So of course I was like, yeah, I'm going to go for it. I want to give it a shot. And so I did compete in the 1987 Special Operations Command NCO of the Year, and I did take that title.
Wow.
So, yes. So when that happened, it was.
Now, technically, you are not.
I was in a Green Beret. I wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's even more impressive. That technically, I mean, and for those who don't know who are civilians, I mean, there are non-Green Berets inside Green Beret units. Yeah. They still need cooks. They still need.
Yeah, support. I was a support guy.
Yeah, I mean, so. They still need mechanics. They're all there. They're just not actual Green Berets, and it's pretty impressive, though, to say the least, that you were able to beat all of them.
Yes, and so we're long story short, I was at the front desk of Command Sergeant Major Homestock, and in there with General Suddeth, and a 4187 again was sitting in front of me for B to go to the Q course, and I was and it was like the best gift ever. It's like
they told you that you didn't ask.
No, I didn't have to ask. I went in there and then he discussed it, the needs of the special operations, and there was a extreme shortage of medics at the time, and I was invited to sign the dotted line and go, and I was fired up. I wanted to go, and the great part about it was nobody could say no. I couldn't be denied by a platoon sergeant or a captain or somebody else, because
talking to a general and a CSM.
Yeah, I had the green light. I was like, yeah, you can go, because that happens in the military. They want to keep, everybody wants to keep their people, and so I had the green light to go, and I mean.
Were you aware that there were other specializations within the Green Berets that you could have done, whether it was a weapons sergeant, communications sergeant, demolition kind of deal, or?
Yes, okay. I was.
You having a personal there was never. I really rather be the weapons sergeant kind of deal.
No, my dad was a butcher. All right, so and my neighbor was a veterinarian, Butch DeGroff, and I had grown up on a farm in a farm. And I was used to blood. I was used to the anatomy of an animal, and how the heart worked. I mean, I already knew all that stuff growing up as a kid on a farm. So this stuff, and I had the natural gravitation to want to learn more about how that body worked, and I knew enough about with the communications sergeant that I was with and the engineering sergeant that I was with. In French Commando School, they talked highly of their medics and all the different things, the surgery that they would do, the veterinarian skills that they were allowed to do, and so forth. And so this was the green light to put it to the pedal to the metal and go.
Okay, so you get sent to the Q course, and the medic stuff is interesting because and. I don't know if you went through this, but I remember, the Green Berets I deployed with had informed me that, one of the things they do in the Q course for medics is they, take an animal that's going to be euthanized, and they basically ask you to keep it alive for 18, 24 hours. So they'll shoot it and you got to stop the bleeding. Then they'll break its leg and you got to splint it. Then they'll,
the goat lab.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely.
There are some PETA folks out there probably listening. No, they're actually not.
Yeah.
There are people
who be
incredibly humane, but that the idea is that, on the battlefield, when someone gets blown up, shot, or whatever, there's multiple triage.
Burns, the whole 9 yards. I mean, you really had to understand your ABCs, your airway, your breathing, your circulations, stabilizing the neck, spine, tourniquets. The medic side of the house, what most everybody attributes to is like a paramedic, your trauma medicine. But the other side of being a medic is actually, the pharmaceutical side of it, the nursing skills that are involved, the veterinarian skills. I mean, I was so enthused to be able to come back to my to fifth group after graduation and helping my neighbors neuter their cats and dogs and stuff.
There you go. It is true. And I don't know if it was back then, but special forces medics are technically the only people allowed to perform surgeries that aren't doctors.
Yeah, I'm not talking. Yeah, minor surgeries, I would say. I mean, all the surgeries that I was involved with, which, not to get crazy here, but I mean, we did minor surgeries with our own teammates and so forth. I mean, vasectomies even, but these are the skills that
what's your teammates volunteering for that one?
No, I mean, hey, it's everything. I mean, it's treating for every medical situation. You get with the doctor, and then you go to the Blanchfield Hospital and you perform the different surgeries, minor surgeries as they are. So, and your skills are perfected. Yeah, I mean, there was, birthing babies and so forth in Somalia and dealing with kids with some horrid injuries, putting them back together, these different diseases and things that you'd come across in the orphanages, and you learn how to take care of these things and give people relief.
All right, so you put on that tab on your shoulder. I mean, do you feel like part of the crew now? I mean, how big of a moment is it for you when you're actually?
Oh, it's a big moment. Yeah, right. Like we start our medical class when we went through the pre-phase. You go through your little beat you up phase there, and you go through your training. And the medical portion of the SFQC course is the longest, right. And you get recycled and so forth. I was blessed. I was never recycled. I think we started our class with like 30 something medics, and there were 8 of us that actually finished without being recycled. And so I was very focused. I was sharing with some folks, how the stack of books and modules that we went through to study and perform. I mean, it was a performance-based training. It wasn't passing multiple choice tests and fill in the blanks. You had to perform, you had to suture, you had to stop those bleedings. You're talking about the GOAT lab, and you had to write those nursing notes. And yes, if your patient died, you went to a medical board and you had to answer very serious questions. You saw your peers get recycled and drop out of the course. And some of the mental stress was so much that they just quit. They just disappeared. They literally went AWOL in one situation, I recall. So, I mean, the stress was definitely there. And, and those that finished were prepared to conduct those medical procedures and so forth that would be needed on a team that may be desolate behind enemy lines or working with host nation forces. That was the big thing,
Right.
So, but yeah, you had a big chip on your shoulder when you had that green beret, the special force.
As you should. As you should, dude. The elite few. All right. So now you get a chance to go to Mogadishu. Now, this isn't the Mogadishu for Black Hawk Down, which happened in 1993. No. This was in 1989. We're still obviously doing goodwill missions and everything else.
Yeah, my first trip to Mogadishu was right out of the Q course. I was actually assigned to the medical platoon at group, which was kind of a disappointment. I was like, medical platoon, man, I've done support stuff. I want to give me somewhere else. But with all that said, 2nd Battalion, and there was always a shortage of medics. So, I was on the next thing flying. I just got married in December. I got my wife to settled in down there at Fort Campbell in Clarksville, Tennessee. And within 4 weeks, I was in Africa. So, and we linked, they had different teams that were operating there. And me as a medic, I linked up with the senior medic on the ground down there and started, surveying and conducting operations in accordance with whatever, win the hearts and minds of the people. So, but as a political situation quickly crashed, we had to evacuate other embassy personnel and so forth out of country while we were there. So it was a quick exodus. It was not like a raging firefight or anything like that, but the country definitely went into political chaos.
Right. Did you, when you get on this short deployment to Mogadishu, is this sort of like your first awakening to a part of the world you didn't know existed?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the most shocking experiences I had immediately, like within a couple of days of being there, was I was riding with one of the senior medics in a truck, and I was watching how women were treated. They were, I particularly took note of women carrying large bundles, wood, whatnot, on their backs and being whipped, by a gentleman that was behind him because they weren't moving fast enough and he wasn't carrying anything. And I was I was literally ready to come out of that truck and just blast that guy, and my medic was like, "Hey dude, you need to chill out right now because you just need to sit back and soak it all in. You need to just take a chill pill." So, they can teach you all they want in school, but when it's in your face and you see women, just see things that a gentleman would not appreciate. I guess I would put it that way, if you would. It was an eye opener. Yeah, it was a shock.
All right, so you get back, and this is when you actually get tied into ODA 525.
Oh yeah.
So you're going to a team. You're leaving this.
I'm going to a team. I'm very excited. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Little did you know how important that team was at the time, but you also have again, this is in '89, so we don't kick off Desert Storm until '91. So you got the time in there, going through schools and everything else. Right.
So yeah. So I get to a dive team, and I had James Linder was our captain on the team, and he ended up being a counterterrorism commander later. I mean, he ended up leaving our team and going there. I had Butch Young as our team sergeant. He is like the godfather of the battalion. He had a great deal of experience, and and I'm the new guy, and I'm green as green gets in regards to the culture, if you would, of being on the Sharkmen. So I was in the training, and I was pushed, and I could swim, but I wasn't at ease in the water like I needed to be. So that was their first focus, is get me in the pool. And I failed miserably. I could not, as far as treading water with my hands above all the things that they had, all the pre-scuba type tasks. I wasn't doing all that great. And I remember even getting to where I lived at the apartment complex, and I was watching this little kid in the pool, and he was treading water. Now he's a little chunky, and I finally befriended that little fart, and I said, "Hey, how the heck are you treading water?" And he says, "I'm just sitting in the water." And that was like all these little things just sit in the water. And I needed to bend my legs because I was trying to pedal hard to keep my hands up above and the water level at my chest. But when I relaxed and sat in the water and just did the simple little egg beater movement with my boom, that was it. Game on. I had it figured out, and I could hold my breath for almost 2 minutes. So that wasn't the big deal. It was just like learning the tactics of being calm in the water. The water's your friend. And once that light bulb turned on, it was game on. And the team, and I felt like I belonged on the team, because if you don't have your scuba badge, you're not in. You're not, because you come and go if you don't pass. And I wanted to stay. And I had Buzzsaw and Charlie and Jimbo, and these were big guys. I mean, these were experienced team guys. Jimbo was a combat veteran from Grenada, from Ranger Battalion. I had some really strong physical people on the team, and I'm the young medic, so I had a lot of dirt to eat to prove to be accepted. I felt that pressure. So eventually I ended up going to Key West initially to be a dive med tech. So I had gone down there and successfully graduated that course. And then soon thereafter, I went down with the team as a team training event with other people from Special Operations Command to do the water infiltration course. And that's a lot of boat work, a lot of swimming and forth. I did not finish that course. My brother was killed in a car accident up in New York. So I was that was a kick in the geezer right there. So my youngest brother was killed in a car accident, and I left that course. I did not finish it. So but then I when everything was settled up at home, I returned back to my team, and I continued to train and get I was continued to train. I had my brothers on my left and right, and they were supporting me 100%. And I was fired up for pre-scuba. I did extremely well in pre-scuba. I was a running fool. And And I was excited to go to the combat diver course, man. And I rocked it. It was a blast. So
now the irony of all this is that
yeah.
you go to dive medical school, you go to the water infiltration course, you go to the combat diver course. All this goes on in 1990, only for them to send you to the desert where there is no water.
Yeah.
In late 1990, in support of, at the time, Operation Desert Shield.
Right.
So, all right, give us the background. Like, when do you find out you're going? What are you told? I mean, obviously, Great Mission is a lot different than the regular conventional forces. Right. So, but what did you hear leading up to August 1990?
Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you what. My wife just had our first son, Shane, in July 13th. And so I was a new father with my first son. And I was taking that in, and I was enjoying it. And all of a sudden, we hear about Kuwait being invaded. We get locked down, and we're palletizing to deploy very quickly. I had a senior medic that was on the team, Brad, and we really just organized all of our equipment that we had and started thinking forward, as in, for every potential forward internal defense operation we might be on, or we knew we were going to have to work with host nations. So, that aspect of setting up triage camps, medical, these kind of things that to support operations over there. So basically it was really a logistical sit down, make sure you got all your tools to be successful. We had numerous team meetings, company meetings. There were rumors of losing our team leader, James Linder, of which we did lose. And I'm the new guy. So I am really in listening mode for the most part. Our team had done numerous training events prior, not even knowing Desert Storm was coming. I mean, we were assaulting and blowing up bridges. I mean, we were live fire exercises. We were already throwing grenades, shooting laws, AT-4s. I mean, all that pre-team training. I mean, there was available time to go to the range. We were at the range. We were setting up these 18, 20-mile road marches, these escape and evasion corridor type events for someone to tell us, oh, your helicopter's not going to be here. You have to go to your next exfil site. And being exhausted and having to go another 5 miles through whatever terrain to get to your exfil. So that aspect of working together with the guys, and we did take a great deal of pride in our physical strengths and our shooting skills. I mean, we were gifted in shooting. I'll just put it that way. And so we were ready. We got our ducks in order, but we were a little shaken about where things could go with losing our team leader, and then also losing our team sergeant Butch Young he was moved up to the company sergeant major position upon arrival in Saudi Arabia. So, and I did get to I stayed with Butch Young. I went to they called it the B team. Right. But and we were linked up with our company commander, Butch Young, the company sergeant major. I was the company medic at that time, and we were assigned to a Bangladesh unit, and we were moved forward into the desert. And I was with Butch until they reconstituted ODA 525 with Chad Baldwin as a team leader, and moving Charlie Hopkins up as the team sergeant.
Okay, so. You're in Saudi Arabia. You're waiting for the cue that we're going to turn Operation Desert Shield into Operation Desert Storm. But
right
as you're getting on the ground there initially,
right,
what's it like? What's day to day like? I mean, are you expecting to see combat at this point in time? I mean, because again, there's a different level that Green Berets are operating at. Some of them are doing. Let's just call it behind enemy line stuff. There's some foreign internal defense obviously going on. There's ingratiating with the local populace to try to figure out what's what. I mean, you as a medic aren't necessarily involved in any of that, but some of your team guys are.
Yes.
So what's kind of in the big? What are you hearing about?
The team that we're hearing all kinds of the other teams were getting assigned to different nations. Armies, different national armies and groups. Some of the teams like the Halo, 524 and so forth, they were getting assigned to go to the border. And that was like, I want to be on the border kind of thing. So, so this, and I'll just tell you straight up, the heat was flipping for a young guy, the heat knocked me off my tail, man. I can remember.
It's a dry heat. It's a dry heat.
Dry heat. I was not. I mean, it took 3 days to just recover from the nausea of the heat. You couldn't drink enough water. I mean, that's what really smoked me in August over there. Yeah, it was hot. And as a medic, I was like, holy crap, man, we got to have bags of IVs ready to go and get ready to start sticking guys. Because if we have to deploy like right in this, in this environment, we're going to be hurting. So, but, all that stuff was, the leadership was phenomenal. They had the preparation, the logistics were there. We were sent down to the Bat Cave. We were protected. It was a matter of waiting for these missions to come down, who we're linking up with, how we're getting forward, the vehicles, the Toyota trucks, all this stuff coming together. And like I said, I was moved up, medic, the youngest medic on the team. I was moved up, I put on the B team with Sergeant Major Butch Young, and we got loaded up and we went out to the desert. And then we weren't there very long when action started to happen. Scud missiles started to fire, and when you're sitting there next to a Patriot missile counter missile system and it goes off, and your ears are going to be ringing. So that was the first wake up call. And then you had the Red Dragon alerts that would happen, and that meant inbound Scuds. And we didn't know if they had chemical weapons. I mean, there's all kinds of that fear, or anticipation of some kind of biological or chemical type nerve agent or whatever that could be deployed with these Scuds. So we had that aspect of the training and preparations being made also. My first christening really out there with the Bangladesh, because we had other ODAs with different elements of host countries, and we were digging in foxholes and so forth up near the border. And one of the guys had set his E-tool off to the side. Now we're at night moving in, digging in, and he left his E-tool like a pick sitting on the side. Well, his foxhole buddy comes down with his E-tool, hits that E-tool, and it comes up and it splits his scalp.
Oh man!
Shovel underneath his scalp. So, with that said, that was the first trauma, to deal with over there. Now they had the team medic on the team. He was already on top of things. So, and I was getting there behind the ball curve, but still, to see the guy's scalp last open and all the business going on. So basically, and you go into basically your trauma medicine, the irrigation, using sterile IV fluids, washing everything out, getting the doc up on the radio, what kind of antibiotics we're not flying helicopters up there near the border at this time. I mean, we didn't know when the exfil was going to happen. So we immediately went into, you just fell right into your training. You had your pharmaceuticals, you had your pain meds, you had your bandages and your sutures and your drainage tubes and things that you would insert up under this. We did that. We worked together. We got this soldier stabilized, and it was a great evening. So, and he got evac within the next 24 hours. So it all turned out well.
Now, you said you ended up reconstituting with your team.
Yes.
End up back in your
Bat Cave,
your ODA, back in your Bat Cave, and this sort of precedes you with the story that we're here to tell of you guys, this small team from ODA 525 of guys who were behind, taking on Saddam's forces behind enemy lines.
Right.
This is on the eve. This is a mission that you had to do inside of Iraq on the eve of the Desert Storm ground war.
Right.
And so give me the kind of lead up. You guys get back together. Give me the lead up.
We get back together. What was great about the team that was back there at the Bat Cave, they had set up close air support training for all the different ODAs to come back to the Bat Cave, go through that communications with A-10s and different aircraft, dropping bombs, doing strafing operations and so forth with aircraft. So the 9-line and the different, communication procedures that you would use and the different radios were well refreshed with the guys, our 525 guys, and they were going to the range. I mean, all these different, preparations were never stopped and ongoing. And Chad Baldwin's Bulldog was assigned to our team, and we had an officer so that the mission was briefed, and we immediately started, prepping and putting together. Terry Harris was extremely resourceful. Jimmy Weatherford, these are the guys that were out there, getting things together for us to build and acquire materials to put in spider holes and use as hide sites that were very successful during the Falkland Wars that we had studied. So that was our plan. And we would do rehearsals in and around the training area, or the areas, the secure areas, digging in with our different e-tools and whatnot, setting up our optics and communicating back to a notional 18th Airborne Corps. So
what is the actual mission that you receive on the eve of the ground war?
We were looking for vehicle traffic and military movement coming up and down Highway 7. So that was the mission as it was understood. And we wanted to get as close to that highway as we could with the optics. And it's nothing like the optics they have today at all. But with the optics that we had, and so we planned to be there for 5 to 7 days on the ground. So we had packed the supplies to do that, to include 5 gallons of water each for each man. We had an extra rucksack, which I ended up carrying the extra rucksack, being the young lad that I was. And so we were packing in a rucksack 2 cache with extra radios and batteries and so forth. And we just kept practicing. And that was the mission, to report everything that we were seeing going up and down Highway 7.
Okay. Seems pretty simple. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
But the whole idea of any good recon mission is to not get noticed.
That's right. Yep. You don't want to get caught.
You're not supposed to know that you're there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
This mission, take me kind of through the early parts of it. Is it going well? What do you see?
Well, I mean, during the prep for it, we had thought of everything, to covering the soles of our boots with the, what we thought what the Iraqi soldier boot looked like. All these different, dragging things behind us to cover our tracks. Getting in early enough to dig in and be completely concealed. These trainings were being conducted, and we were successful getting in underground, burying ourselves with 4 people per hole, and existing for 3 to 5 days in our training. We were doing it. And so when the mission kicked off, as it was stated, we took off and ended up returning back. We were called back, and we lost hours of time, and we refueled, and we took off again. And the photo, there was a lot. I'm backtracking a little bit here. You go into isolation. It's just you and your guys, and you're learning every little bit of piece of information. You're busting each other's chops at every turn. Me and Buzzsaw were called the Catholic boys. All these little comments and stuff coming on, and are you going to pray? All these little things, these little jokes that you have with each other, and because you know each other so well. You talk about the signals and the things you got. No, you would just see that your teammate walking at night, the silhouette. You knew exactly who it was. Just all these little things that we had. We'd been so close together, and it was a well-prepared professional group of guys that were really working through every course of action that you could imagine, to include being compromised by people. And I had the drugs and things that I carried on me to put somebody out, medically, pharmaceutically, and put them down while we tied them up and so forth. And so that was thought about, and it was discussed and so forth, and that's how it went. Now, when it happened, we were way behind the timeline. Me and Jimmy Weatherford were the guys that were on first watch. We had I called it a woodchuck hole. If you grew up in the Northeast, you know what woodchucks are. Yep. So as our woodchuck hole had it, and we heard the little voices outside our hole, and we kind of tapping Bulldog and giving a little kick to Buzzsaw and saying, hey guys, we got company. And I was looking over at Jimmy, who was looking out the hole, and he quickly jumped back and looked at me, and I'm looking at the hole, and there's this little kid's face sticking in the hole, and I'm like, oh. Wow. So we had like a big bush pulled over our back door, if you would. And I was the guy close to the door, and I just went out the door, and I was drawn down on these two girls, and I saw a little boy behind him, and Buzzsaw was right there, right at my side, and it was God's grace. I got to tell you, man, when Bulldog said we didn't come here to shoot kids, I mean, just think of that statement right there on two guys. Another ounce of pressure on that trigger would have changed the rest of history. I'll just put it that way. And then to catch them, it was just unthinkable, because as soon as I looked over the edges of that ditch, there were people everywhere. They were out there collecting wood. They had their little herds out there. I probably saw 20 people out there.
Now, these are just curious kids, right? Like
they're out there with their mother. Her mother's probably out there collecting wood. She's probably going to have to collect some water. This ditch that we were near did have a little amount of water in it. So they're out there, and they saw something that just didn't look right. So they were investigating. The older girl was probably my granddaughter's age, probably 8, 9 years old, and the other one was maybe a year and a half younger than her. And then the little boy was probably 4 years old, because when they took off running, they had that little boy between them, and his legs were not touching the ground. They were running full speed away from the big green monsters that just came out of the ground, because that's literally what it was a green, because they froze. There was like a stop in time right there that everybody was just frozen, and they took off. So, and they were running fast as their little feet would carry them. And then it was just okay, what do we got to do? We got to let the other guys know, and now they're whole. And it was just we're watching them, and we're watching what the other people are doing, and no one suspects anything. No one stops doing what they're doing. And I remember sitting there, and I started praying already right there. I was like, oh Lord, we're in I started repenting my sinful ways.
Yeah.
And started making deals with the God Almighty, and moving forward. So the other team was alerted, and we pulled back. We gathered what we could, and we pulled back. So we were a team of 8 again. And we went back a little further, but like I said, nothing happened. We're down in this ditch, and we set up. There's some more trees and bushes and so forth. And I remember we kind of just tucked in there, and we were continuing the mission. We had the radio up. We're talking 18th Airborne Corps. No, we're canceling it. We're doing it, and we're actually reporting vehicles and different traffic, like we were sent there to do. And it was daylight, so you could see it. And we had to plan. We'd wait for night. We were going to move forward closer, so our night optics so we could get where we needed to be to see traffic moving up and down at night. So right. We're already thinking we're not leaving. We're going to go forth and do and continue the mission.
So when you get discovered, is the first thing fear? Are you like now afraid that you have to exfil immediately, get out of there? I mean, what's going through your mind? And the aforementioned Chad Balwans, it was the ODA commander at that point in time, the team leader. What were the conversations with him?
The senior guys got together. The Rob Gardner, the intel sergeant, the team sergeant, Charlie Hopkins, Daryl Hovermel. These senior guys were just taking it all in and looking and reevaluating the situation. And the thing is, we're not under attack, and there was a comfort there, and we had been awake already all night. We've been digging in, physically exhausted, and contemplating, hey, do we take the yellow pill now or not? Like to stay awake, no, don't take the yellow pill yet. That's a last resort, but we were able to continue. We kind of went back into this rotation, And I'll tell you what, I dozed off because I was under a bush and I dozed off. I wasn't on the watch per se, and a goat woke me up. So I'm sitting there under this bush, and then I just feel this presence of something really close to me, and a goat was eating off the branch was eating like a foot away from my face. And I opened my eyes and I saw a man and a boy walking towards us because the goats were there was goats in our ditch right up on us. So we had a flock of goats, and the herder and his son were 5-10 yards away from us. And Bulldog got up and started talking Arabic to the guy. But this one felt different because the guy's, his headdress, the colors, he wasn't your average nug. I just got that, I had that, and the guys were, we weren't like talking out loud to each other. We're trying to be quiet and lace and be still. And we're setting up, you're checking your perimeter and everything and looking around, you got cover, like who else is here? So all that started going down. Well, this guy wasn't happy. He had that look of disgust on his face. Like he's mad. He grabbed his 11, 12-year-old son and pulled him away. And they took off running down that field. And it wasn't shortly thereafter, we heard 3 shots. 3 shots. And I was like, oh, well, that could be the old rally the boys signal, And it wasn't shortly thereafter that we started seeing, I called it the National Guard coming out. We had a village right across the highway, and there was these groups. They looked like they had mixed uniform clothes on. They weren't tactically, they're just like a group was coming down the middle of the field. Another group was coming from the south. Another group was coming from the north. And they're just kind of like walking in our direction. And I was like, oh boy, this is going to get retarded. And, it wasn't. So we just held our ground. We had the radio up. We're talking. And the middle group, a couple of them got pretty close. And Bulldog, again, stood up. I mean, basically almost stood totally up and said some things in Arabic. And that's when some shots were fired in our direction. You heard those, the bullets flying by us. So he drops down, and then they ran. They ran basically away. Those initial couple of dudes ran. And so that was the time to say, all right, we're moving, we're getting out. And that's when we piled our things up there was like a T intersection in the ditch, and we piled our gear up. Terry Harris had some explosives that he rigged up, already had pre-rigged up just for this occasion. And a lot of the gear was left in that pile, and it was rigged to blow. So, and then we took off running down that ditch and under fire. So we were getting shot at this time. The game, I mean, the fire, the bullets were flying, the zings were flying, the thuds in the, hitting the mud. You remember that you just hear the thuds of the rounds hitting in the dirt around you and the mud around you. And we were running down that thing with our weapons ready for whatever was to our rear. We weren't 100% sure. Buzzsaw was in the front, and I just remember I was like 3 or 4 men down, and we did our couple banana peels, but they weren't they weren't like pursuing us like right on our backs, And then we heard the explosion go off. We heard some screams with that, and buzz, and then shortly there, buzz, the ditch ends here, and but it was a perfect firefighting position. It was about 3.5 feet deep. There was like a pool at the L shape. I took the corner of the corner. We fell into position. We had perfect 360-degree field of fire. Now, the weapons that we had a couple people with the 9mm short-range weapons and stuff but the 6 of us had M16s and a couple of us had M203 grenade launchers, and we covered for ourselves. The guys that had the 9mm, they were at the point, and at the end. So anything that was coming up that ditch, they could handle efficiently, whether they come up from behind or to our front, inside that perfectly formed battle position. I'll put it that way. And so then it was literally waiting for the perfect time to come up out of that ditch and let them have it. And you talk about, you said something about fear. And I remember reading different dialogues and stories from the Vietnam guys and talking about their mouths being so dry that they couldn't speak. And it was hard to breathe. And I was at that point where my mouth was so dry, I could not speak. And our team sergeant, Charlie Hopkins, was dragging a 2-quart canteen on about 15 feet of 550 cord. He dropped it at the point man, and he ran through the ditch, checking everybody, took an observation point that was next to a tree so he could under the concealment of that tree and bush, he could see everything with his binoculars where they're coming from. But he slowly dragged that 2-quart canteen through our ditch, our guys, so they could get some water because of that initial shock, if you would. And having that water just was so calming. And then he just started to talk calmly, reporting where the people were at and where they were coming. And Bulldog told us to get ready. He says, that's where it's time to fight like junkyard dogs, boys. This is going to be it right here. And then I'll tell you what, man, it was so instinctive when that buzzsaw let go with that 203 round, and you're in that ditch, and then just to come out, and your senses are so locked in, your eyesight, to where you can see the hairs on a person's face at 150 meters. That's how intense your skills get in those moments. And every round counted. I'll just leave it at that. And it was a very successful initial awakening for them. I'll tell you,
Did you get a sense how outnumbered you were?
Yes, because Charlie was observing these vehicles and trucks and troops offloading at the highway. So yes, you're hearing this, and you're getting, you got your magazines out, you're up and ready, and say, all right, this is it. We couldn't run. There's nowhere to run. You're on a pool table.
Right.
You're luckily enough, you're sitting in a great fighting position, and it's just, that's it. And man, I'll tell you what, I'd look over my right shoulder and I would see the guys locked in. I mean, Jimbo Hovermill had a cigarette in his mouth, and this is a combat veteran, and he would take a drag on that cigarette and he'd come up out of that hole and boo, 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 and then come back down. Okay. Cause he made a mental picture of what was coming next, and he'd come out, boom, boom, boom. And then, and Buzzsaw was nailing targets with that M203. And it was clicking. And then we got, we had that PRC 90 radio because things were in a flurry. And we heard a response on that radio. And guard, this is guard, and guard on guard. And I started hearing voices and stuff. And it felt good. It felt good. I mean, you never felt that you were free, and you're still saying your prayers, and you're just wishing for the best. And then all of a sudden you just heard the aircraft in the air. And man, I'll tell you what, you talk about, God bless the Air Force. I'll tell you, I'm sitting next to Pete over here, my little Air Force brother. I'll tell you what, man, you hear that scream of those engines up high. And I remember the first targets that they took out were on the bridge, and Charlie was watching it all. And then the cluster munitions that went off, and the ground shaking, and you hear the noise, the screams, we're winning now. You're not running us down without a good fight here. So that proceeds to go forward. And after that first hit, things calmed down for a little bit. And then these little pockets would pop up here and there. And, the team sergeant, I had the M16, and he grabbed me, pulled me down towards Hid's End. You see those two guys over there? Get rid of them, and you're looking, because we started to get the advantage. We could keep our heads above the ground a little bit. Right. And we're talking to the aircraft. I'll tell you some stupid things that happened. I mean, obviously, I had the pen flares with me, and at one point, the guys were like, "We don't know where you are," And we had like VS-17 panels laid out on the bottom of the ditch, You can't see that from up there, And who's got the pen flares? I got the pen flares. I had the pen flares. So you got rounds coming over the top and you stick your hand up there, poof, you shoot that little pen flare up. Well, guess what? You got more rounds coming at you now because you just marked your position, And I said, I don't think we need to do that again. All these little things that are going on. But it was Jimmy Weatherford had that little, 3x2 survival mirror. And he started flicking because the moon came up as the sun was still up, and he was yelling to Buzz, I'll tell him to fly between the moon and the sun. I'm going to try to hit him with a reflection. Bam. Got a hit with that flipping little mirror. That was the clear marker for where we were at. And they did it again. So he was reflecting. He had that sun and he was just hitting it and running it up and down, running it up and down. And really that was the moment of, you guys?
How simple and ingenious, like all at the same time, right? Like just use what you have in front of you to survive kind of deal.
Yep. And it just went better from that point forward. And then when they would drop their bombs, the buzzsaw would, he was the call for fire expert. I mean, he had those guys on the radio and he would say, from the last hit, 500 meters, this direction, or 200 meters this direction. Now, and we cleaned house on that initial ditch. That ditch was the tree there. You didn't recognize the ditch when it was all over with, as far as foliage goes. And but there was a ditch north of us that an element had moved into, and I was noticing at about 150 meters out from my position that I would see the little heads going by, so I knew there's people in there. And then after a bit, I saw a tripod get placed up into one of the little divots, and I was like, uh-oh. So I was telling that the bus, I said, dude, I'm not like our west of our position, 150, 200 meters, we got a tripod. And I could shoot at the tripod, but that's where they were at. And there was a discussion, do we need to drop a bomb that close? And the call was made. I've seen a lot of little heads go past that tripod or in that little that ditch right up there. And that was also the vicinity of where our cache was buried. Not even thinking about it at the time, but it was. So the calls were made back and forth, and they were it's danger close big time. And it was, I don't know what size bomb it was. All I know is then when they said, put your head down, I buried my face down in there, and it was like the ground was like jello. It just rolled, and all this crap was falling on top of us. And I was just sitting there, and I couldn't hear real well because of the ringing in my ear of all that was going on. And I just started looking at the guys, and people were moving around, but nobody was talking. It was like silent for a good bit. And I remember hearing the radio, guard, where are you? Guard, where are you? And everybody was just kind of stunned. And then finally buzzsaw, we're here. And it was like, but that area with the drone bomb, there was nothing left. There was a crater. So that ditch was just wiped out. And from then forward, it was just minor sporadic stuff going on as darkness fell. And and then it was.
Was there a point where you feared for your life during the whole thing?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. When we were running down that ditch, getting shot at, and branches and things were falling down in front of us, and the thud of the rounds and the zings of the stuff going over your head. And absolutely, right there. Yeah, that experience of like, can I not talk? My tongue is my mouth is so dry. I guess that would explain real fear. You're still functioning, you're still doing, because you're in that mode of muscle memory, if you would, of just doing exactly how you've been trained. And
was there a sense that oh bleep, we just started the war kind of deal?
No, we knew the war was going on.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't any bleep if we started the war. The war was happening.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, you got the jump on it, so to speak. Like, you weren't supposed to be the one starting the war kind of deal.
Yeah, we knew that it was early on in the actual ground offense kicking off, which was that day.
Right.
And hey, we're in it. We're in it. And whether we survive it or not, we're in it, and we're going to do the best we can. And man, I'll tell you what, I can't emphasize training enough and it paid off the rest of my career. There was never any question about, move, shoot, and communicate, and have the professional skills of every individual out there to be the best they can be at any given time, because the situation changes instantly and generally not in your favor.
How do you get out of there? When do you get out of there? And when do you get out of
the base? We wanted to get that. We knew there was aircraft inbound, and I just remembered our team sergeant Charlie Hopkins telling me and Terry, says, clear our rear. So we had our group there in that ditch, and it was silent enough and getting dark enough. We had the night vision goggles, and we did like a heart shape, from our position to our rear. We found it like another berm, if you would, to as Terry and I were going out and around, we saw the results of the bombing and the firefight as we circled around, and we found a spot that would be good to set up our IR lights for the aircraft to see and come in on, with some with a berm protecting them from the highway in case some elements were out there that we were just not aware of that wouldn't light them up once they came down to pick us up. So we did a quick recon, we came back, we found a good spot, guys, pack it up, let's go. So, and that's basically what happened. And we moved.
When you had seen the destruction from the bombing and everything else, so you're like looking around like, oh shit, but I guess we're winning.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I never felt good or to even think about like joking or, I knew that the damage was happening there, and I knew that the lives were lost, and I was elated that none of my teammates were injured or in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And it was just it wasn't a time for celebration. Our infill, it was my bird, our bird, Chad Baldwin's bird, that hit that berm. And we were I hit the top of the helicopter, inside when we hit that berm. And it shook and everything. Our gear and everything was all over the place. So there was never a time. And we saw the tracer rounds flying through the desert that night as we were infilling. And so even though you had that, okay, we're one step closer to getting out of this situation, you never felt that you were ever out of that situation until we landed at King Khalid Military City. So
when you get back and you guys start, looking at each other and looking around and not even debriefing, but,
yeah.
What are you all kind of reacting? How are you reacting to each other? What are you saying?
Well, we're giving there's a lot of hugging going on.
Yeah.
And, just, it was almost like a dream. You had been awake that whole time, and you were so happy to be back. At the same time, you were so physically exhausted and drained that you just gave everybody a hug. I know like some of the guys wanted to start writing, what had happened down. I know Rob was, trying to get folks what just happened, because it happened so fast. And it was just trying to get together. And well, first of all, is everybody okay? First of all, you get back and we've done training exercises where guys accidentally caught a piece of shrapnel and different things that happened, and you're flying back on the bird and you look at your arm and it's covered in blood. It's your buddy bleeding because he didn't even feel the shrapnel that hit his shoulder or arm, right? So that aspect of it also happened. So you're first the medically, is everybody really okay after all this? And then of course you're pulled in. Everybody from the unit has been listening to this firefight happening on the radio. So everybody's like, you're being greeted. And then of course all the questions start coming at you from the different guys in the debrief, for hours,
right?
And
not a scratch on anybody, right?
No shrapnel.
How
No,
shocking
nothing.
is that more than anything?
I'll tell you what, buddy. That's God's grace, man. What can you say?
Near your ricochet or around or,
No, we were looking at some of the gear that we were covered in the ditch, and different items had holes and pieces of burns and things
right.
through it that were damaged and whatnot. But our bodies were whole. There was nothing physically wrong. Yeah, our ears were ringing; you could hardly hear any. Those kind of things. Which took a while to just come out of that experience and go through the debriefs, and then basically we're told we're going back. I mean, within 24 hours, we're told we're going back because we had to get the radios and the crypto that were in that pack. So then it was like, okay, we got to go back. And guess who buried the bag? It was me and Charlie Hopkins. So guess who's going back?
You had to go back and get it, and you went back and got it.
No, we didn't have to go back because however it all played out, the way the bombs dropped and all this other stuff. Remember, I was telling you that's where that last bomb that blew that crater out. I mean, that's where the trees were, and that's where those bodies were coming through. So, and the war had moved so quickly that it wasn't. I have to say, I mean, I'm the young medic on the team, so I strongly assume the risk versus gain of getting a radio that we didn't need anymore because the ground offensive was over within days. So was it worth risking aircraft and more people to go get a blown up rucksack full of radios and batteries? With some crypto in there. So we didn't have to go back, but we did reset and go into Kuwait and cleared bunkers up in Kuwait, the trenches and stuff, the Iraqi trenches. So we were involved with that operation for a while.
So literally that's the taste of combat, right? Like that's your lone.
Yeah. So yeah, as the young medic on 525, that was my christening. And it really set the stage for the rest of my career. It was the best foundation you could ever have, because it wasn't long thereafter that going through some more schools and whatnot, and SOCOM with the Ranger School and some other schools and so forth, that I was soon to be the team sergeant of 525, because our team was broken up for the most part upon our return. So with all that instant experience of the senior guys, they were drafted to go to Fort Bragg, to the Special Warfare Center. Our Chad Baldwin's was also taken. There's 3 guys left on the team after we returned, and things were reconsolidated. Me, Jimmy Weatherford, and Terry Harris were left with 525. And it was reconstituting a brand new team. New guys that hadn't been to scuba school and all this so forth. So new team sergeants, new team leaders, and so forth. But as time would, my continued efforts on 525 got me ready as a team sergeant, and we deployed to Somalia.
Right. So you were actually there as part of Operation Gothic Serpent, but you weren't there in October when.
No, actually, on the airfield, I did link up with a lot of the Ranger guys that I went to Ranger School with in 6-92, and our mission over there primarily was taken out using our sniper teams and so forth, and around the airfield. We did some assaults on General Deed's places of caches and whatnot. We did have a few little situations where we're working with the Pakistanis, and they got hammered with machetes real bad. Me and Terry here were out on that operation with that. And we also were doing some operations up in Bosaso, Somalia, up in the Horn of Africa, which was the quintessential Special Forces mission, big time. We had a location up there that we had a house. We were getting our own food from the ocean. We had recruited a guard force that we had to train and so forth for further on operations up in the north. So I had that opportunity to work up there with the 8-man element, and it was as far as working with host nation people, NGOs, other government organizations and leaders. That was a great experience.
I mean, it's crazy to think that there's a lot of this like combat adjacent experience for you. That time at ODA 525 and what you went through during Desert Storm, it is, it's just an incredible story. Like, I mean, it's something that nobody.
I deployed to Somalia, in early February, and on our anniversary, our ODA was in a firefight in Somalia.
Oh, wow.
I mean, within 2 weeks of being in country. So but we were prepared. And again, the guys were outnumbered and they made it back. And we had patrols down there around in Kismayu, on patrol, being dropped off by the Black Hawk helicopters at night. We had routes to recon on foot and identify elements, enemy forces, if you would, operating in that area. And we did not get detected. Now, but this is all as a result of the experience, a lot of the experience that happened during the Gulf War and bringing that home. And just, I can't, Terry Harris was our engineer. He was our demolitions expert. He was so gifted in navigating a jungle. I mean, we had a situation, we had to return to a landing zone, and we had been walking through basically jungle terrain for over an hour. And he went in at the middle of the night and he made it back to that LZ like he had walked that trail or whatever that was 100 times. And we had situations where we had to set up and watch these little villages where some activity was happening, and just, Kent Dulaski and some of his skills that came, just the professional of working with people that are just so passionate about their jobs and wanting to do their very best for the man on their left and right and whatever skills that they had. And it's an awesome, it's a life, man. And it's a blessing to be almost 60 years old and be able to share that. And the biggest blessing is, I'll tell you something else. I've worked with guys from the 5th Special Forces group almost up to, I'm still good friends with them. And I got some guys that I'd worked with in Blackbird Technologies and in Raytheon that I've been with over 20 years. They know our wives know each other, our children know each other, and we're still working through life's experiences to this day. And that's the experience and the brotherhood and the blessing is to be working with the young special operations soldiers all these years and watching, and I was on the technical aspect of it. So to take an experience in the old days, I've been called an old man a lot lately, but to have to be physically on the ground within 300, 400 meters to identify a vehicle or something, to now where, well, let's let the drones do it. I mean, to see that quantum leap. I mean, but to be able to be the contractor guy that I used to poke fun at my whole life when I was in uniform. I was that guy now, but I was able to learn to share experiences on how to use these different tracking devices in very unique ways that were so successful for Blackbird Technologies and the special operations community during the Afghan and Iraqi campaigns, and identifying targets and follow on targets immediately following. I mean, to just have, and to work with the same people that I have been with since the late 80s and 90s. I mean, yeah, it's humbling.
Again, you, as I mentioned earlier, the rest of your career goes without much of notable experience because nothing was going on really. I mean, it's the way it is. You get stop loss before 9/11. You were already on your way out the door. Like you had planned to retire.
I had that great experience with 525 up in Uzbekistan. Who would have known, a month later that we would be setting up in Tashkent, at an airfield where I just left. So, I mean, a lot of those relationships and stuff were very fruitful for the unit, that next month, really. So, and as the rear D guy, nothing, no combat by any means, but once again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I say all that just to kind of,
but
it was winding down already.
It was winding down as far as my, big career experiences go. But to be there for the younger guys and, the casualties that were coming in for 5th Group from Afghanistan in the early days, to be there to greet their families and to share with them and to visit the hospitals. And we did have some fatalities of friends of mine, medics and so forth from 2nd Battalion and so forth. And that has a lot to do with that book on those 365 days of scripture, because the only thing we had a lot of these kids when they, did you know my dad, these questions that would come up and you had to bring peace to their hearts and to their wives. And it never ends. It never ends. I'll just share with you some of the, I had a Navy SEAL, great friend of mine that committed suicide. And I may have been the last guy that talked to him on his cell phone, and I was working with him. And some of the, these life experiences and having the ability to articulate hope through Christ has been the experience of a lifetime. Because what do you say to a child? What do you say to a wife? What do you say to a teammate?
When the words are inconsolable.
Yeah. How do you, and to see that the level of love among your peers in uniform, and to the extent that they will go to comfort one another in these traumatic times is a story never told. And my son was at Fort Benning going through the officer basic course. And I was able to go to the infantry museum, and I had my wife and my uncle and my parents with me, to visit my son there. And we're at the museum and going through all the different, and all my family are veterans. My Uncle Bob served in the Navy. My dad was in Korea. So at that infantry museum, everybody had a story to tell. And at that museum, they had a special room set up for families. And I was able to go with all my family members through these different conflicts and wars and not shed a tear. But when I went into the room for the families and I saw the photographs, and if anybody hears this and has been to that museum, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And when you see the photographs of the wives and the husbands and the children hanging on the fences, watching their loved ones get on those planes and get on those buses and not knowing if they'll ever see them again, and that broke me. Because I'll tell you what, there's so many prayers being said in that ditch that Chad Baldwin's talked about, but there are even more prayers being said by our fellow Americans in church on Sunday mornings and on the radio stations and all the parades and the things that are going on for our people, for our men and women in uniform. And when you come home, that's when you need to be thankful for all those prayers that are being sent by your Americans at home when you deploy. So that's the roll up, man. That's a full circle of life right there. To be able to go as a young man, serve your country valiantly, and then come to the understanding of the reality of God's in control. When it's all said and done, he's the man. He created you. He gave you a name. You're on this earth. And by golly, be thankful when you come back, because there's a lot of people back home, lifting you in prayer. So I've been able to share that in that No One Is Fatherless book, because a lot of kids out there, a lot of people didn't get their dads to come home, and it hit you. So
no, I mean 100% it does. I mean, I wonder, you talked about some of the casualties from 5th Group coming back at the beginning the invasion of Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a moment where you start to see that and you look back and you think back to what you had went through and go, how the hell do we ever get out of there? Like,
Well, yeah. Now we had our casualties, in Somalia.
Yeah.
Pat Badlager, our company sergeant major, and Brian and they got ambushed and they got hammered, and we had our vehicles shot up. I mean, like shot up. We had armored glass and stuff on our Humvees. Sergeant Deeks was blown up in an IED early on, but right prior to us getting there. So our vehicles, we were doing what we could to armor up our vehicles, the sandbags and the floorboards, the armored glass and so forth. We're doing what we could with what we had to modify our own vehicles, as we were out patrolling and so forth. And, we did have our casualties and so forth. So, and we did have the mortar rounds coming in, and we had the attacks that nobody hears about, because they're so, nobody got injured. So it's just life out there in these countries that are hostile to our presence that Americans are there serving. We're seeing Syria in the news right now because things are happening, but how many people have forgot about the guys in Syria, and gals? So, I mean, our service members are just in so many countries and things happen, and yeah.
Do you think that, had you not had the combat experience you had, you would have gravitated towards faith so heavily?
Oh, not have gravitated? Oh, no. The combat experience was a big deal to have to do with gravitating towards faith. I mean, it's one thing, as far as in regards to faith, when you hear faith, what does that mean? That means I'm going to pray. That means I'm going to go to church and I'm going to read the Bible, but to experience Jesus, to be in a situation where the odds are you're just not supposed to live. You're just not going to make it. There's 200-300 people out here that are going to prevent you from going home, and they're bringing it to you. So, and there's just other circumstances that you just can't make it up. Why did that mortar round land on the other side of the wall? If it would have went 5 more feet, it would have landed on my side of the wall and blown me up. Why did that Humvee be able to pass through that flooded road that was put there to stop you so they could lay it into you with a 50 cal? So there are just too many instances that occurred that, hey, it's not your time because you have a story to tell. You have to share these miracles, and that's exactly right, is because answered prayer builds your strength, builds your faith, So, yeah, absolutely. Combat experience definitely strengthened my faith.
Sure.
And, yeah. So, and I came from as a military guy, my family was broken. I'm just going to shoot you straight. I was a loose cannon. I was physically strong, fast, agile. My endurance was noted. Climbing ropes, ladders, obstacle courses. I was leading the pack in all these things. And it goes to your head as a guy. You don't think about God. You don't think about praying. I don't need that. You're driving hard. And at my first wife, my 2 daughters, they paid the price for that. And I was divorced early. I met my current wife while I was, Carol, who I've been married with for over 34 years. I met her while I was going through the medical course. 1 month after my son was born, I was gone, for months. A month after my second son was born, I was gone. I was in Ranger school for months. Right. So, and not only that, you're not the best person when you come home. You start mentally building up, because, my thing with my sons was, boys, as soon as they were old enough to do push-ups and flutter kicks, guess what? They're doing push-ups and flutter kicks because I was in.
You're that dad.
Yep. No, I mean, I was doing it with them. So, hey, yeah, my kids, my sons, they had to listen to them tell stories about what it was like being with dad. is asked they could make a movie about it. And we lived out in the backwoods of Kentucky, man. And Linton, Kentucky is in the backwoods. It was gravel roads to get to my house back there. We lived on deer meat, squirrels, and catfish. So, and my boys were taught to shoot, move, and communicate and exercise. Those faith, fitness, and knowledge were the survival pillars. When I would go on a deployment, I would come back and we'd talk about it, And but they grew up. They're fine young men. They've grown up. I couldn't be prouder.
It's so funny. You said those three terms, and I just chuckled. Move, shoot, and communicate. I remember that on active duty as a lieutenant in a pre 9/11 world.
Yeah,
I always thought the people who said it were the douchiest people in the world. I'm like, we're in an office. I don't understand what you move, shoot. I'm talking to you right now. What do I got to move? We're standing right next to each other. What?
Yeah.
I don't have a gun. What are we doing here? And then you learn what it means when you're in combat, because those three things are
to
be able to do it at the same time effectively in order to do it. But the idea of expressing that to
kids,
adolescent kids to me, or pre-adolescent kids to me, is rather comical. I'm sure I've probably done that at some point in time with my kids.
Sure, you will.
These three things: communicate together, kids. Right now I just want them to run, catch, and throw. But that's
right.
Might be asking a little bit too much at that rate either.
As a dad with my two sons, it was faith, fitness, knowledge. The whole body. You had to be strong. I want you to do something every day to get stronger. I want you to do something every day to learn something new. And I want you to recognize that you were created by God and he knows your name, because I'm going to fall short.
Right.
And you're going to have to rely on the big man. So, and that was my emphasis with my kids. And that book reflects a lot of that. And then as I matured and the spiritual side of myself gained confidence. And I learned that you have to exercise your faith to become spiritually strong. You have to pray. You have to engage with your brothers and sisters in Christ and help each other and grow in the knowledge of God, to get to know God better. And when you include your family in that, everybody has a center focus. It's the cross. And you're not being pulled apart by minor peripheral interferences in relationships, because your relationship is not to please one another, but is to be morally grounded to the cross. And you take better care of each other focused on the cross. It just naturally happens. And it has been reflected in my marriage, which every marriage has its ups and downs,
sure,
and its struggles. But when we were focused on the cross, we were able to work through challenges, and it works with the relationships within our family. And it was difficult. My daughters didn't have a dad,
right?
And they taught me forgiveness, because my daughters, Kim and Lynn, forgave me for not being there, and I was selfish. I get it. I was so focused on myself, my career. Throughout, you're so embedded on being that, that soldier, that guy, that teammate, that leader, that you emotionally detach yourself from the emotional side of your wife, your children, because you're going on another deployment, whether it's training or otherwise, because crap happens on training events. You train harder than you hopefully have to endure in combat. So, there's communication problems there. So
is that what you want people to get out of the book?
Yes, I want people to get out of the book to focus on the cross, because I tried to do it as a soldier. I was always able to fix everything that I had control in. When I was a senior NCO in operations, a team sergeant, if I wanted something done, I said, you do this. And he would say, yes. Or you do that. And he would say, yes. You come to me, and go here and go there. And I want you to, whatever. They would do it as I did as a soldier. But you can't treat your family like that. You can't treat others like that, with that mentality and that curtness and that You have to learn how to love.
Mhm.
You have to, how you touch, giving somebody a hug, just that hug. You don't have to say anything. Just give them a hug. Your kid, give your kid a hug, let them know that you are so important to me and I want you to feel it.
Let's play a hypothetical game here.
Go ahead.
I'm not a religious person. I'm not.
Okay, I get it.
He believes in God. I'm an atheist, whatever.
Right.
Why do I want to read your book? What does your book give me?
Your book, I give you a path. It's a simple, because I was a guy. I didn't have time for God.
Right.
All right. I'm too busy. My feet hit the ground. I'm going to the gym. I'm drinking my protein drink. I got my plugs in. I'm rocking it. I'm tearing steel up. I'm ready to kick butt. And I'm me. Right. If someone's got a problem, deal with it. I got that attitude. But you know what? Hey, give God a chance. Give it a chance. Do you want to experience, do you want to be alone when you're 40 years old? I mean, really alone. Because you can't be physical your whole life. You're not going to be good looking your whole life. All that vanity, all that
trying.
Yeah. You get, hey, God forbid, you have a bad parachute. I had a bad parachute accident. I feel it today. I woke up in the emergency room. My wife held my hand and the doctor cauterizing my nose because it was over here sitting on my cheek, because I parachuted into the ambulance on a jump at Fort Campbell and it rang my bell good and it hurt. But you don't know. See, you don't know when it's over, So with that said, take 30 seconds and read one devotional a day. Because that's how simple it is. They're one quick deals. They're the 365 devotionals that I had to share with my entire family because I failed as a human father. I did not meet everybody's expectations. I didn't it did as hard as I tried, I couldn't do it. But when I surrendered to Christ and I said, Lord, I can't do this on my own. I feel the guilt of my daughter's not having a day. I feel the guilt of my youngest son telling me, after now he's big enough to whoop my butt. He said, Dad, I was afraid to be with you because I felt I was on death row. And I was like, Blake, why would you say such a thing? He said, Dad, every time we would go out and do whatever, go anywhere, and something didn't go quite right, you would explode. And I thought I was going to get killed. And boy, I tell you what, you talk about failing as a father, hearing that from your son. You kidding me? That's a time for, you need to reevaluate how did I fail so miserably? I gave that kid everything a father could do, humanly, but I didn't hug him enough. I didn't tell him, Blake, I didn't hug my kids enough. I wasn't there when they were scared, and you got young children right now. And I used to, and it's critical right now with kids to know that their dads, they're loved. And you know what? You need to teach your kids that I'm going to fail. I promise you, I'm going to let you down. I'm going to hurt you bad. I'm going to emotionally crush you because I'm going to be selfish. I'm not going to show up for your graduation. I'm going to miss your wedding. I'm going to fail in some way that's going to hurt you. But you know what? There's always hope in Christ. And those scriptures in that book build you to that relationship with Christ, and your heart will change. If you will give God a chance, give it a chance, one day at a time, read it, think about it, and then go back to the gym and tear it up. You know what I mean? Go get it.
There you go.
Go get it. Go get some. But you know what? The seed's been planted. And when you're out there in those woods and you're in God's creation, see, we live in a world right now that we live in a man-made world. But I love the woods. As a kid growing up in Western New York, I was more comfortable in the woods, in God's creation, if you would. Letcher State Park's a beautiful place. It's the Grand Canyon of the East. And I wasn't, I grew up a Catholic. I got it because I was in nature, if you would. I was watching animals being born. You talk about the medic thing, our veterinarian. I was pulling calves out of cows at 14 years old with the vet, not getting queasy, but I was watching birth. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
all this stuff was going on that, that was meant to be like it should be. So when I felt at home in the jungle. I felt at home in the desert. I felt at home with the scorpions and the snakes and the jackrabbits that I would physically chase down jackrabbits in the desert with another teammate. So we would have some chow, some fresh meat, So that's what that book offers you.
Yeah.
It gives you a path, because you're gonna if something traumatic happened in your life, whether it's broken marriage, failed relationships with your children and so forth, it's not over.
Just to put it back together.
You can go forward. You can learn to love your family, and that's what that book's going to steer you in that direction, to be there, to know how to talk to people, to give them words of encouragement, to just touch them nice, give them a hug. Don't be afraid to be a dad.
Yeah.
Words of encouragement, give them love, and teach them about how God loves them. Because one day, son, I'm not going to be here. One day, daughter, I'm not going to be here. And don't be afraid. I'm going to a better place. Don't be afraid. What was that thing in the military? They told us, sit, look, and listen. Right? Sit, look, and listen. When something doesn't feel right, stop.
I was always bad at 2 or 3 of those, by the way, for the record.
You did? Did you fail Ranger School?
I was just bad.
How important was that?
I was always looking around.
Yeah, when something didn't feel right, that's the Holy Spirit telling you, hey, boy, you better chill. Right now, stop, because there's an ambush sitting up in front of you.
It's coming.
And then so you would stop. And that, what that teaches your family, what that teaches people is don't panic. Don't lose your mind.
Sure.
Stop. Reevaluate. Take a few steps back. That's the things that you learned in Ranger School, patrolling, the looking for those in today's our veterans.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man. No, don't haste makes waste. Just stop. 1 is none, 2 is one.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yep, exactly, buddy. Front sight.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah. So all these, what, if I don't, and I was convicted. I'll tell you right now, Mark, I tell you, I couldn't sleep. The whole, how this book came about with talking to Pete and a friend in high school, being in a bind, and I was excited, man. I was talking to my daughters again. I got to see my grandchild, from my daughter, Lynn. And that was not in the future for me with doing it myself. I'd already failed that. But I was using WhatsApp, a teammate of mine, Eric. I get a little nervous about sharing last names, but his name's Eric. His wife is Pam, and they'll know. He told me, he said, Dan, check out this Bible app. Smartphones were a new thing back then. So I started looking at that daily devotional, and then, the Holy Spirit's working in my head. So I started sharing those daily devotionals with my entire family, my 2 cents worth. My son Blake started getting them. Dad, that's not 2 cents, man. That's 50 cents. So that's part of it. It's kind of a little smart little shap there that I had to share in that.
Aren't you glad the kids are always on top of it? Right.
Yeah. So, hey, man,
a step ahead.
I'll tell you, I know I'm babbling. I don't want to get on, I don't want to convert you on radio here. So, but, it's so true though. And, at where I'm at in my stage of my life, and I shared, a lot of the guys that I've served with are no longer with us. But when it's quiet and we're sitting there with our brothers, in the end, we're always praising the Lord, and we're praying that we'll be in Valhalla together, and we're wishing the best for their families, and we're filling in, to take the place of those that are lost in various ways in our communities, for our veterans that don't come home or they're badly banged up. And, but that's what it's about. So it's just another venue to share through experience how the Lord, who I believe, sincerely, our Lord and Savior Jesus, and laid the foundation for joy on earth in a very dark world. I'll just leave it at that, And here we just had this situation in Nashville. There's good and evil out there, buddy, and it's really clear to see where evil is at.
Mm-hmm.
My daughters still live in Europe, in Germany. I was recently there, and I see how things have changed with the war with Russia and Ukraine, and just how things are managed, and the fear factor. When I was growing up there, I didn't grow up with fear. I was fearless. Today everybody's locking their doors, locking this, locking that. They got guns in their house. They're locked and loaded, ready to go. Someone's, COVID set the stage. I work with young people now, the high school kids that that lived through that lockdown period where they couldn't talk to their friends and so forth. And we need people to step up and share hope now, where it's at a critical state. There can be a lot of bad things happening in your life, but if you have faith, I've learned that if you have faith in Christ, there's light at the end of the tunnel, man. It's all right. You don't give up, So
perfectly said. Perfectly said.
Don't give up.
The book is No One is Fatherless. You can go to the website, nooneisfatherless.com, get the book there. Again, 365 days of daily devotionals. And Dan, I mean, I love this story. I do. I love the ODA 525 story, and certainly
still is. Buzzsaw's daughter got married this month. So
there you go.
God bless him,
Yeah, and what's interesting too is you're not alone, and you don't have to worry about converting me. I mean, there's so many of us have found faith in it's a God, faith, and country. I mean, that's
right.
it. Those are the three.
Yeah, exactly.
Would have built who we are.
Built upon, yeah.
It doesn't mean that everybody has to believe in the same thing, or as Till Valhalla says, it doesn't matter what you believe. We'll all be together as the fallen. So I think they're wonderful words. I love the sentiment. I love your story, and I appreciate you reaching out and being willing to share it. It's been amazing getting a chance to talk to you and know you. And I hope everybody buys the book. Keep it at their bedside. 30 seconds a day. It's worth it.
Take a shot. Thank you so much, Mark. Just looking at you on the screen here, I can see you're a fine young man. You got kids.
It depends on who you ask, I guess. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, I wish you the best, man. And it really is about our children. I mean, really, it's all about the kids and taking care of people to our left and right, and showing the people, there's a better tomorrow, by golly. So let's not quit, and
that's definitely not.
I'm just very appreciative for giving me this opportunity to share.
Thank you. It was great to get a chance to know you, and again, loved hearing the story. So wonderful words. God be with you. God bless, as they say.
Amen, brother.
As the Italian priest says, Padre, Figlio, Spirito Santo, amen.
Exactly.
There you go. Dan Kostrzebski, thanks so much for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. God bless.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground podcast, hosted by Mark Zinno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.